Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is your host Thomas Tyree here from On the Hot Podcast. Today, this will be the Combat Series episode number 60 for you guys today. Of course, this episode is going to be coming out on all four of our platforms, our Instagram account, our Facebook account, our YouTube account, and our Apple Podcast account. So, we're back. I took some time off. It's nearly been 2 weeks since the last episode I recorded for you guys. I took a long, much-needed vacation away from life, from my daily activities, away from the podcast. I feel rejuvenated, refreshed, and I'm glad to give you guys Combat Series episode 60 for you guys today. So let's get into it. I'll be sharing my UFC 305 main event fight prediction between Israel Adesanya and Dricus Du Plessis. So, in the main event of UFC 305 this Saturday night in the world of MMA inside the UFC world, we will see Dricus Du Plessis defend his middleweight championship for the first time in his career against Israel Adesanya in Australia in the main event of UFC 305. So let's get into it. These are my following storylines that I have for the fight heading into the main event of UFC 305. So starting off with the first storyline is addressing the bad blood between the two respective African fighters. Of course, DDP is a South African fighter. Of course, Israel Adesanya is a Nigerian fighter. Two African fighters that have bad blood between each other. And we've seen the bad blood begin to boil. It's been brewing in the pot for the last 365 days plus when it happened last spring in the UFC where Dricus Du Plessis defeated Robert Whittaker, which led at the time to Israel Adesanya, who was the middleweight champion at the time. They had that heated confrontation between the two respective fighters. The rest is history. Obviously, we know DDP wasn't available to fight Israel Adesanya next, which led to Sean Strickland defeating Israel Adesanya, which I'll touch upon again in a few moments. But the bad blood is there. And this is really the battle of Africa between the two respective fighters because both fighters claim their countries and they claim Africa a lot. DDP views himself as the true first ever African UFC champion in UFC history. There is some bad blood here, so I feel like the winner of this is the Battle of Africa for the middleweight championship. Now, the next storyline I have is, can Israel Adesanya get back to the top of the mountain one more time in the middleweight division? I've touched up on this several times when I talked about MMA on this podcast, on this platform. Israel Adesanya obviously is a two-time middleweight champion. I declare him as the second greatest middleweight champion of all time in UFC history behind the great Anderson Silva. But Israel Adesanya has defeated the likes of Alex Pereira, Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa, just to name a few names on the list of what he's done at this middleweight division. You don't win the title two times in a division of the UFC by accident. You got to be the best of the best. And Israel Adesanya has been the best of the best at this division for a long time. However, he's attempted to climb this mountain one more time in the middleweight division. He is the hunter instead of the hunted, going after DDP, Dricus Du Plessis. And I know a lot of people out there watching and listening might be confused of how Israel Adesanya got dominated, dismantled in his last UFC fight when he fought Sean Strickland, when, in my opinion, it was a shutout. 5 rounds, all 5 rounds go in favor of Sean Strickland when he put on that masterclass performance nearly a year ago to take away the middleweight championship from Israel Adesanya. So it is confusing that he is getting a title shot in his return fight. If I were Dana White and UFC executives, I would have had him have a prove me wrong fight. See that you were still a top legitimate contender. But I get it. UFC is a money business. They go with the big money fights, and this was a big money fight that we were supposed to get a year ago. So I don't have a problem with it, but it is going to be interesting to see if Israel Adesanya can prove he's still the guy at this middleweight division to possibly become a 3-division world champion. A three-time middleweight champion in the UFC. Now, final storyline is Dricus Du Plessis. Is he ready to prove doubters wrong? And we're going to find out a lot of answers Saturday night, but the biggest answer for DDP is he a paper champion? We're going to find out. With his win over Sean Strickland, I don't believe he is a fluke champion. I think DDP has arrived, and we've seen him climb the ranks in this middleweight division before he finally captured the middleweight title in the beginning part of 2024, defeating Sean Strickland. But it'll be interesting to see, like I just said a few moments ago, it's going to be interesting to see how DDP handles the pressure, because instead of being the hunter, he is now the hunted. And he's got a big bullseye on his back holding that middleweight championship, because this division is stacked from top to bottom. We got a lot of contenders right now in this division. But he's got his hardest fight upcoming this weekend against Israel Adesanya. We're going to see how DDP handles the pressure. So, my tale of the tape heading into this fight, starting off with the challenger first, Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya is 24-3 in his MMA career, 24 victories, 3 losses. He has 16 victories coming way of knockout. Currently the number 2 ranked contender in the middleweight division today in the UFC. Currently stands at 6'4" and has a reach advantage of 80 inches. Then I'm looking at the champion here, Dricus Du Plessis. Dricus Du Plessis is 21-2 in his MMA career. 21 wins, 2 losses, 9 victories come away of knockout, 10 victories come away of submission. Currently the reigning defending middleweight champion in the UFC. Currently stands at 6'1" and has a reach advantage of 76 inches. So the height and reach advantage goes to the challenger in Israel Adesanya. Now, let's move on to the game plan. These are the following game plans that I have for these two respective fighters to follow if they want to walk out of Australia with the middleweight championship. New or still middleweight champion in the UFC. So, let's start off with the challenger here, Israel Adesanya. I think it's best for Israel Adesanya to win the striking battle and win the counter-punching battle. As we know, Israel Adesanya has made his money. He's been a household name in the UFC from being a significant with a kickboxing background, being a significant striker. One of the best kickboxers that the UFC has to offer on their roster today. Hell, in the conversation for one of the best kickboxers in UFC history. And I feel like someone that Dricus Du Plessis, he's obviously, to me, an elite fighter. But there's something that is kind of awkward about him defensively. And I feel like if DDP goes the route of trying to win the striking battle or the counter-punching battle with Israel Adesanya, I think that could be a bad decision and a bad chess move in that octagon for as long as the fight can go. Maybe 5 championship rounds. So I feel like if Israel Adesanya could get going with a striking battle, make Dricus Du Plessis feel intimidated, or out-battled in the striking department, or wins the counter-punching battle, or the counter-striking battle, I think this would go a long way for Israel Adesanya to pick up the victory against DDP in the main event of UFC 305. So next, Israel Adesanya has to use his MMA IQ. Israel Adesanya is once again a 2-time middleweight champion. He has been on the big-time stages, on the big-time platforms, on the big-time. Has headlined several UFC events. And he knows what it's like to be in the octagon with some of the best that this middleweight division has to offer in the last 5-10 years in the UFC. And I don't think that a lot of people are going to think that Israel Adesanya needs one big strike to defeat Dricus Du Plessis. I don't think that's the case. If he is patient, lets the fight come to him in a way that he's not bullied, which I'll touch up on. If he's doing that and uses the MMA IQ to get out of a lot of traps that DDP could set, I think Israel Adesanya could be on his way to winning the point battle against DDP and winning this fight by decision, setting up traps, setting up combinations for DDP to fall for. And that could lead to him winning this fight via points if necessary. So, and last but not least, Israel Adesanya has got to come fighting forward. He cannot fight on his back foot. He cannot backpedal. He cannot retreat in that octagon. He has to come straight forward to the champion, Dricus Du Plessis. If he lets DDP bully him, walk him down, and possibly with takedowns and not being a good defensive fighter, if he lets DDP bully him around the octagon, I don't think that there is a way for Dricus Du Plessis to win the fight if he's not coming forward. And for majority of the fight, he's retreating, going backwards, fighting off his back foot in the octagon. I just don't see a way for Israel Adesanya to win the fight if he does that. So these are the following 3 game plans that I have for Israel Adesanya to follow. Now, for the champion, Dricus Du Plessis, I think it's obviously the right call to out-wrestle Israel Adesanya. We know Israel Adesanya is known for his kickboxing background, like I just said, and we know he's known for his striking ability. We all know Israel Adesanya is not a good wrestler and not a good grappler in the UFC. And Dricus Du Plessis has a history of outworking his opponents, out-wrestling his opponents. He landed outlanding takedowns on his opponents. He outlanded Sean Strickland in the takedown department. Sean Strickland is, in my opinion, has the greatest gas tank in the middleweight division today. But Dricus Du Plessis made it seem easy to go in the deep waters with Sean Strickland for a total of 5 championship rounds. He outworked him in that fight. And once again, going back to his wrestling background, he has a total of 10 submission victories. Israel Adesanya is not a great grappler. I think if he could get the ground control going, get Israel Adesanya and a lot of uncomfortable submission holds, and keep him grounded on the mats, on the octagon, it could go a long way for Dricus Du Plessis to win this fight by decision against Israel Adesanya. Hell, maybe even submission. But next, I think it's best for DDP to control the pace of the fight. Fighting coming forward. And if you have studied Israel Adesanya, only his 3 losses in the UFC, if you study how the 3 opponents have defeated Israel Adesanya, they have come in forward. They are actually the more physical and more bigger guys than Israel Adesanya. Even though these respective fighters fight at middleweight, you still got some beef. You still bulked up. You're still going to be bigger despite the weight. And he's let the guys that he's lost to, like Alex Pereira and Sean Strickland, have been bigger. And they have really bullied Israel Adesanya in those 2 fights out of the 3 fights that he's lost in the UFC. They've been more physical and fought coming forward, which led to Israel Adesanya getting knocked out by Alex Pereira. And, of course, on Strickland having his way all over the octagon against Israel Adesanya. And it seems like when he's fighting going backwards, he really doesn't have a fair answer for himself. So I think that's going to be really important. Last but not least, I think Dricus Du Plessis needs to land some significant strikes in this fight. Now, obviously, in the striking department, the Israel Adesanya is the better striker than DDP. We all know that. But I think Dricus Du Plessis does have dangerous hands. He's knocked out Robert Whittaker to become a popular name and put his name on the map. That's what really punched his ticket to the middleweight championship fight against Sean Strickland when he defeated Robert Whittaker last spring by knockout in the 2nd round. So I think if he lets he let his hands go several times in that 5-round championship fight against Sean Strickland, something that Israel Adesanya couldn't do because Sean Strickland fought Israel Adesanya before he fought Dricus Du Plessis. And I'm just following game plans, following tape, following study. I think these are the 3 respective game plans that these respective fighters need to follow if they want to walk out of UFC 305 with the middleweight title. So, this is tough. It's coming down in the middle. But I'm going to go with Dricus Du Plessis to successfully retain the middleweight championship against Israel Adesanya in the main event of UFC 305. I really believe that the momentum that DDP is riding at this particular moment in his career, climbing up the ranks of the middleweight division, getting that knockout victory against Robert Whittaker last spring, defeating Sean Strickland in an epic 5 championship round fight in January this year. I think that momentum is going to get DDP the advantage, and the reason why he's going to defeat Israel Adesanya in the main event of UFC 305. Plus, I do believe that DDP has secretly been training and preparing himself for this fight against Israel Adesanya for the last year in the UFC. And like I said just a few moments ago, all of Israel Adesanya's losses, the 2 out of the 3 losses that he's lost in the UFC to Alex Pereira and Sean Strickland, they've been much bigger. They bullied him in the octagon, fought him coming forward, and had Israel Adesanya retreating on his back foot, fighting backwards for the majority of the fight. I think that's what DDP is going to do, present that game plan coming forward to intimidate Israel Adesanya, who has not been in the octagon for a total of 11 months. We also got to keep that in mind as well. But I think DDP is going to do a great job creating the pressure, trying to force Israel Adesanya to make some mistakes. He might land some significant strikes doing that. And also, we all know that DDP is a pretty good wrestler. 10 submission victories, you don't get that by accident in the MMA inside the UFC world. So I do expect that DDP is going to land a lot of takedowns. The ground control is going to be there for for him to dominate in the wrestling department against Israel Adesanya. I just think the striking department, him walking down Israel Adesanya and out wrestling him and getting ground control, not getting the minutes up in ground control, is going to be the reason why he defeats Israel Adesanya in the main event of UFC 305. So with that being said, first segment back, and that is my fight prediction for this weekend between DDP and Israel Adesanya.